All right, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to all who are attending our webinar here from Seiler Geospatial with What's New with ESRI Collector. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have a question, please put that in the Q&A form. We do have somebody who's monitoring the Q&A, and we'll try to get to all the questions that you might have answered in the time that we have allotted here. The webinar is slated for 1 hour. Might not take that long, just depending on how many questions that we're going with, and we will get started. So the webinar would be presented today by Joe Motti and Jay Reister. We are both mapping technical support for Seiler Instrument.
So for those using ESRI Collector on iOS, or this will be your first go around with learning about it, the requirements more recently than not are, of course, iOS 11 or later, and that can be with the iPhone, iPad, or iPod Touch. Requirements on the Android side, which Joe will get into a little bit more later on, but I'm just going to go through the slide here, is at minimum the 5.0 Lollipop. Also, too, account requirements, especially in the last year or so, you've noticed that things have changed. We used to be at the level 1, level 2 users, and now there's 5 user types. So depending on what your user types are now, 1 through 5, that, of course, then either limits or opens up what you can actually do with ESRI Collector in the field. All right, we'll go to the next slide here. You want to kick it forward, Joe? It's not working.
Yeah, okay.
There we go.
You're good.
Okay, slight delay. Fun with Zoom meetings, right? Everybody's learning how to use Zoom. All right, so what is predominantly new with iOS? Of course, there's been many changes over the last couple of years, and Jeff Shaner and his team have done some great blogs out there, but we're just going to highlight a few things more recently. About a year ago, actually, navigation started to come out for straight line and turn by turn. If any of you have used it, that does come in handy. Straight line is not really spelled out, but after you select a feature, you actually then have to scroll down on the left-hand side and click on the word compass. And so what compass does, it gives you a straight line from where you're currently at for your GPS location, and it will give you a distance and a bearing of how far you are from that feature. And that comes in handy, especially when you've got things that are buried by snow piles or have been plowed or paved over by street crews and all that fun stuff. Turn by turn can then be used with either Google Maps and or if you have Apple Maps up and running on the iOS device itself. Something new as of January, which is a great feature, especially out in the field, snapping. For a while there, it was you had to do everything all the way back in Arc Desktop or in Arc Pro. You had to wait because snapping was not available in AGO and or in Collector itself out in the field. And we'll show an example of that in a little bit here. Offline base maps, this is something that is new too. We actually have a blog post out about this that Dan put together, so you can check out our Seiler mapping support blog, which we'll show you a link to that later on, where you can side load base maps and go offline with iOS. Something more recently, actually, as about a week ago, this was in the recent blog post that Jeff Shaner put out, that you can finally attach PDFs, Excel, and Word documents to your actual features instead of just photos from your actual existing iOS device. And lastly on the list here, something that is new too, reuse list entries between forms. Kind of like almost like I guess remembering what you last typed in and or a repeat function. So that's something that you can check out too on the recent blog post from Jeff Shaner about a week ago.
If I recall, Jay, that was just released maybe this past Monday of this week, right?
Yeah, it was. Yes, correct. Yep. All right. So we put together a quick little video here, and I'll talk over the top of it here. So snapping with iOS, takes a little getting used to. There's 2 ways to do it. The one example that I'm showing here is, oh, it went too far forward here, Joe.
Sorry, Jay.
Okay. Back to the video. All right. You can see the GPS location there in the top left, the blue circle with the arrow. I've got a feature that is fairly close to that GPS location, and so all I'm pretty much doing is tapping on the screen, and then what pops up then is the attribute list, and I'm moving the cursor off of the GPS so that I can actually use snapping from that particular water valve, and all I'm doing is dragging across the screen to another point that I want to connect it to. And so when it highlights orange, that means you are ready to snap. Of course, in your settings, underneath the profile within iOS Collector, you do need to turn snapping on. Snapping is turned off, of course, by default. So this is one example. This is one way to do it. So I did not have an existing line, but I had existing points. Of course, that makes sense, right? You need 2 points to make a line. You need 2 vertices. So the other way would be, I don't have it in the video, is that if you had an existing line, but it was not connected, it was just kind of sitting there floating, either you GPSed it or you digitized it, the concept is similar. You could actually drag the ends, if you will, and edit them to snap to either point, whether it's the one there at the northwest or the one to the southeast. So there's 2 ways to do snapping. All right, see if we can go to the next screen here. Some other things that are new, you've always been able to do GNSS metadata for the last 3-4 years, but something is new too within this update for iOS, and of course it's in the blog from last Monday. Direction of travel, speed, azimuth, and position source. So these are things that you can play around with and add as far as new GNSS metadata. And of course there's different ways to do that, so you can read up that on the support blog. Joe does have a link for this here. Do you want to click on that one right now, Joe?
Yeah, I can click on it.
Okay. Thank you. So this is the post that Jeff Shaner put out within the last week. So this highlights exactly what we just covered here in a little bit more detailed format. So there's the adding other documents. Here's the recent list values. And then down here towards the bottom is about the capturing additional GNSS metadata as far as direction of travel, speed, azimuth. This is particularly, of course, if you're going to be driving, of course, or walking and doing other features other than just point features. So this primarily is not going to be for your point features.
All right, throw that away. All right, go.
There you go. And so devices that are supported, especially Trimble devices, GNSS receivers, the Trimble R1, the Trimble R2, and then the R10 Model 2, and then most recently, the Trimble R12 are supported with iOS. Joe will cover what's supported with Android once he covers that section.
All right, let's see. All right, so I'm going to take over here and talk about what's new with Android. So for the past year, we've been waiting for Android to kind of catch up to where iOS is at. And within the past few weeks here, we've actually been brought to the forefront, and ESRI has released a product now that mirrors with what iOS looks like. So with Android, you're going to have this modern user experience. It's an identical look to iOS. There's not very many different features in terms of the look between iOS and Android. As you see in my screenshot here that I have on the right-hand side, it looks exactly as the screenshots as Jay had on his iOS versioning here. You also have that form improvements, the ability to do arcade expressions, add videos and photos, and also scan QR codes while collecting data live in the field. You also have the ability to do navigation, straight line, and turn by turn. So we can start to see where Android is picking up where iOS is capturing its information. Now, here's one of the things as to where Android now differentiates from iOS. You have the ability to collect 3D data collection in the iOS versioning and apply a mean sea level value to your Z. So what does this mean? On the Trimble side of things, we can sideload a geoid model and actually see our elevations live in the field. So yay, that's what we've been looking for a long time. So appreciate Esri and Trimble for working on this and getting this coming to fruition for us. So to talk a little bit more about where Android comes into play, there are 2 apps that you need to download. So what I have here is some screenshots. If you go out to the App Store and you put in Collector, you will see that there are 2 versions of Esri Collector out there. You will want to download the one that I have highlighted and circled, the Collector for ArcGIS. That is the brand new version. The other version is now going to be named Collector Classic, just like it was on the iOS version. You can run these side by side if you need to. If you're not ready to move to the new Collector, you can run the classic version and the new version side by side. The next one here is you will have to download Trimble Mobile Manager. So Trimble Mobile Manager is taking the place of, if anybody's familiar, the GNSS status application. So with the new version of Esri Collector, you will no longer use the GNSS status application. It will not work. You will have to go out and download the Trimble Mobile Manager. This is where you can do all of your setups for your information, and then put in and then sideload your geoid models onto the device to get elevations into your Esri Collector. So one thing here that with the addition to Trimble Mobile Manager is it allows for RTX to be used successfully with Esri Collector. It can take that reference form that RTX has. And if nobody's familiar with it, RTX is a paid-for subscription source that's beamed via satellite from Trimble, and pretty much where you do not need cell service to get down to 2 centimeter levels of accuracy with RTX. So with Trimble Mobile Manager, you have that ability to see that information and put a transformation to work properly with Esri Collector with the use of Trimble Mobile Manager. So then the other one here is this one with Android. There's a little bit more opportunity to use Trimble equipment with this. So you can use the R1, the R2, both models of the R10. So there's an R10 Model 1 and then there's an R10 Model 2. The difference between them is the Model 2 has an iOS Bluetooth chip built into them. Then you have the R12 and then the TDC 150, the TDC 600, and then the Catalyst. So that is really what you have in terms of collectors with Trimble that you're using out there in the field. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run another poll here, and we're going to launch this poll really quick. And the question is what GNSS receiver are you using in the field? And if you're using multiple, you can select multiples. All right, looks like we got a good thing of questions here. I'm gonna go ahead and end the polling, and then let's share the results. And the majority of you are using R1 or R2. There's a couple other ones that are out there. So thanks for sharing your results with us there. All right, let's move that out of the way. And so now, this is how Android looks in the field. So if you're familiar with how Android worked in the past with the GNSS status app, yes, you will be using 2 apps again with the Android version, but it does work seamlessly. So if you watch this short video of how I have collecting data, all I'm doing is I did my setup previously to going out into the field. It launches Trimble Mobile Manager, and then it flips back to Esri Collector. And as you see, now I'm connected into my centimeter R2 and getting down to my centimeter level accuracy inside of Esri Collector. So now I'm able to go out there and collect data. So once you have this information paired up and started and ready to go for your set this up for your crew to go out to the field. Once it's set up, you don't have to touch it. You can go in there and you can take that information and send that information out into the field. The user will pair to their R1 or R2, launch Esri Collector, and they're ready to go collecting. It's pretty seamless and easy to use for you in the out there. So let's go in comparing both of these applications. So I have this little picture of a highway, and this is how I think about where Esri Collector is at this moment in time. So you have Android that's in one lane, and you have iOS that's in another lane. They're traveling both down the same highway, but they're in different lanes. So iOS has some functionality that Android doesn't have, and then Android has some functionality that iOS does not. So it's really kind of a pick and choose battle. But at some point in time, we do believe that they could potentially be in the same lane, moving towards the same direction in the future. So here's a little chart of what's different between iOS and Android. So the only difference that Android, or there's four differences really right now. Android can give you mean sea level elevations. iOS cannot. Android does not do averaging, does not give you a 95% confidence level, and does not have snapping. Now, that's not to mean that Esri is not working on this and going to bring this to a future build. They just wanted to get this application up to and get this build out to the customers so they can use them in the field. So there's another blog, and even if you go into Jeff Shaner's blog and look at his information, it will tell you, and they'll tell you exactly what's coming down the road. So for Android, you will have the GPS averaging, and then you'll have 95% confidence interval, and then you'll have the PKI support. So what I'm going to do here is, and I'll show you exactly where I got this information. At the very bottom, he says, what's coming next? And I took this information, and Jeff's very good about what the team is working on and what they're going to bring out in terms of updates. For the iOS versioning, what I would do is stay tuned to the Esri blogs. Jeff Shaner is very good about, hey, we're getting ready to do this release, and he will put a blog post out about it and allow you guys to know the information of what is coming in terms of doing data collection. So, give me 1 second. I can't see my slide. So I guess one thing here is I can show you is we actually have another thing you guys can sign up for is if you go to silergeo.com, we also have a blog and news that you guys can sign up for. We have a mapping and GIS, and this is how we get information out to customers so you can see what the mapping team is up to, or we're going to have future events or blogs or upcoming trainings and such with that. Jay, do you have anything extra to add on to the Android side of things?
Well, you've got the blog there. That's good. There's Trimble resources, which I think you're going to get to, so I'll hold off on that.
Okay. If you guys are not, if you're not familiar, there is also a Trimble community hub, which you guys can sign up for, and it is actually open to the public. All you need to do is create a Trimble ID, or as we refer to it on the tech support side, TID, so it stands for Trimble ID. There is a blog post that is put out there by Matt Morris, who works on the Trimble side, and this is how to prepare your data for orthometric heights and GNSS for Esri Collector. So we're not going to really go into detail about how to set this information up for mean sea level elevation, but you can go out to the community blog post and have and see this information information that's out there. Next here, I think, is we have some Q&A going on here. So let's see what kind of questions we have going on. Does anybody else have any questions while we're looking at any questions? If so, put them in the Q&A and we can go through and answer. All right. Well, not a lot of questions going on. So, cool. Well, like I said,
this questions that are out there if you want to. Dan, I think, has been trying to answer some of them.
Yeah. So there are a couple questions out there. You guys actually have access to view the Q&A questions. So like there was one question that was out there is, you know, is there an advantage of iOS compared to Android? And it really is. What are you guys looking for in terms of doing data collection? Are you needing snapping? Are you needing averaging? Are you needing the ability to average that data? Then the iOS version would be the application to go to. So in the averaging side of it, that would just be taking more than one GNSS shot out in the field. So you can average or just take a 1 second epic shot inside of the ESRI collector. Another question we had in there was, does snapping work with all points, vertices, and edges? And as long as snapping is enabled, then yes, you can snap to points, vertices, and edges there. I have a question in the chat that says, well, or let's see. I have a question about going offline with iOS. Is that possible with Android? Yes, you can go. Or I'm not entirely too sure about that. Jay, do you know yet? Or
I'm sorry, I was actually replying to someone's chat there. What was the question again?
Offline for Android?
Not aware of it at the moment. It is available for iOS, and we do have a post about that actually Dan did a couple months ago. Again, it's one of those things to confirm with the development team at ESRI as to a timeline when that is on the wish list. I'm not aware of it at this time.
Okay, thanks, Jay. I'm answering some questions here too. So when somebody asked, are we recording this for replay? Yes, we are recording this webinar, and we will send this out to everybody that registered by at least Monday for you guys here. Right. So somebody asked, will Catalyst work with iOS? No, it does not. Catalyst works with Android only. I have another question here is a method to nest a point. Currently there is no nesting in terms of collecting data in the field. So there's no nesting capabilities yet.
I do see a question out there from Troy. Does snapping work with all points, vertices, and edges? Primarily, it's for point features only to try and get those, whether it's your edge of curves or your water lines or whatever you may be trying to do. It's at its most basic starting point. Think of it this way: it just was released in January, so they're starting small. Those are probably things to continue to look on the blogs and or out in the GeoNet community. If you're not familiar with GeoNet, that's ESRI's community forum for asking questions.
Let's see. I'm going to try to go through open questions here. Somebody asked, what does a configuration of collector with Trimble products look like? So the biggest thing here is both Android and iOS look very differently. So if you we also have a Siler YouTube page where we demonstrate how to connect, and it's also in our blogs. We have a couple blog posts in there that detail and show you how to connect up a R series receiver to the iOS version, and then we have an R series that connects up to the Android version as well. So there's another question here. Are the snapping rules set in Portal? Actually, no, the snapping rules are in the application itself in Esri Collector. Okay.
I'm answering a question back to Dave here. Dave had a question about could you create extra features inside of Collector, meaning ad hoc, if they were not already have been published? And the answer is no. The reason would be is if you got multiple field crews, then all of a sudden your map would be different from everybody else's. Pretty much everything is stemming from whether you're publishing it from desktop, pro, server, or if you started from scratch in AGO, the feature service is the prime, and so that hosted feature layer is what it is the answer. So you would have to edit backwards up in the cloud and or back in your desktop or in server. So like you did say, Dave, in your poster, that you do leave yourself some breathing room for an extra feature called unknown, and then you'd have to edit and deal with that back on the database side. So no ad hoc adding a feature on the fly in Collector in the field.
Yeah, Jay, Dan answered that one
Okay.
through text. So another question here is from Mitch is, if you have a topology set up where points exist along a line and you snap a line between two manhole points, will the points between them along that line also move? If you're snapping a line between 2 points, the points are going to stay exactly where they were at. So your points will not move. Jay or Dan, do you know this one? Is snapping possible when creating polygons in Collector? I think it.
I'm not aware of that yet. That's something I have to check with the Esri team on. I'm going to say no at the moment because this first iteration was for points only, lines 2 points. So I'd have to do some testing on that, and or find out.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that with polygons yet.
And then let's see, what else do we have here?
We got one from Jim. He's asking, if you aren't collecting elevations, you're using RTK, do you still need to run GNSS status or TMM in the background? And the answer is yes, you do still need to have those running on Android in the background in order to get your corrections in Collector.
I have another question here. Is it possible to repeat features? Yes, you can repeat features in both the new Android version and iOS version. You can repeat your features in there. I've used it quite a bit when I've been collecting sign data. So I didn't have to type everything out because it was the same exact sign I was collecting. So yes, you can repeat data there. What is one here? Got a little tech support question. We have a J3 phone. Problem is we have certain features that won't load. We have to sign in and out sometimes to get it to work. What's going on? My thought would be it could potentially be an ESRI issue with your data. If that's the case, then I would get with ESRI to see what could potentially be wrong with your data information that you have hosted. If not, I would uninstall the application and then reinstall the application on your device and see if that fixes that issue. Does anybody else, let's see, have any questions? So we're getting back to rules set for snapping. So So Caitlin, in the application itself, in Collector, it's going to create its own snapping, because you were never able to snap inside of Collector in the past on the iOS version, and it has its own tolerance set up in terms of doing snapping. So I'm not 100% sure if it would override your rule set in Portal, but Collector is functioning on its own set of rules in terms of snapping in the field. Okay. I don't have any more questions coming through. So another question came in here, and if you noticed, we have not talked about Collector for Windows. As of right now, back in August when we had some discussions, they were working on adding in they were working on bringing additions into Windows 10, but as far as I know right now, Android and iOS are leading the way in terms of downloads, and I've seen the numbers, and the numbers for Windows are severely behind in terms of iOS and Android. And I agree, Paige. Windows has a lot of issues, and the reason we don't necessarily recommend using Windows 10 with high accuracy, so that would be using an R2 and using an Ntrip, is it has issues pushing that real-time correction source across the applications to ESRI Collector, and it's not a Collector issue. It is actually a Windows issue that is blocking the talking between the RTK and the Collector app. Okie dokie. So I don't have anything else to add here. So there's a few ways that you can contact us. And like I said, we have the blog. We also have a map support email address. So if you send an email to us at mapsupport@silergeo.com, it will email both Dan, Jay, and I. So we all three get that email. You can contact us at our toll-free number. We also have a Twitter that you guys can follow along, and we post information about webinars and stuff that are coming down the road. So you can follow us there. Jay, Dan, anything, or I guess anything else to add in terms of this?
No, I think you've covered it.
Cool.
Yeah, I think we're
Any
pretty well
last
covered
questions?
here.
Excellent. I have one
Any
more
last
poll
questions
to.
just in the queue?
Yeah, I got one more poll to run for you guys, and it's just an end poll, and it's just kind of what kind of content would you like to see from us in the future? All right. We got a few more votes coming in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end polling and share results. Looks like you guys want to see more tech talks from us, so look for that and virtual instructor-led training. So we have the ability to do both of that. We're just seeing what you guys would like to see in the future. So I appreciate you sharing that information with us. And that is all I have for the webinar. So just so you know, guys, stay safe out there in this time of COVID. Siler's still open, and we're here doing tech support and helping customers out. So please feel free to reach out to us in the tech team if you have any questions, comments, concerns. We're here to help you out and still open and answer all your GNSS, GPS, and data collection needs. But until then, we'll see you guys on the next one, and I appreciate you guys coming in and stopping in and for our webinar. Have a good day.
Yes, thank you everyone for attending.
Bye, guys.